Hey, Brian Greene is a leading physicist professor at Columbia University. Last year, he gave a talk at Google on his new book, Until the End of Time. In this book, Greene steps back and is taking a pretty broad view. He talks about evolution, the cosmos, determinism, free will, topics of interest here. Let's have a listen to what he has to say.
Certain kind of chemical combat, not species combat, but chemical combat, in which molecules learn the trick of replication. And those molecules that replicate faster, more stable, more efficiently are the ones that will grab more of the natural resources in the environment, and therefore their molecular form will dominate the demographics. And then molecular mutations, where the copying mechanism is imperfect, can yield other molecules, which may be better or worse, but those who are better at replication will, of course, now dominate from that point forward.
So it just happens. Molecules and atoms swerving around, contacting each other, taking on new configurations, some more efficient than others, taking over. I like this segment early in the interview because it's such a nice, succinct description of Epicureanism here in the 21st century. The 2,000-year-old philosophy here is still alive and well. Natural selection was always present in Epicureanism, but not explicitly, formally kind of stated. And that's what you're getting here with Greene. A nice statement of bringing natural selection into the prebiotic, inorganic world. So important if you're going to spin stories about evolution to have natural selection at play here. Let's move to the next segment.
So, in a sense, you have evolution is building up structure. Entropy, at some level, is assisting it when it's creating local pockets of order, but in the far future, as the narrative describes, ultimately works in tension with evolution, degrading structure as we head to the very far future.
Okay, so no, the laws of thermodynamics do not assist evolution. The entropic barriers to evolution are astronomical. That's just a scientific fact. Evolutionists are always trying to talk the way around this, for example, by saying that thermodynamics does not outright falsify evolution. Well, okay, so what? So here, Brian Greene has brought this to a whole new level. Our Google interviewer, who clearly supports Greene's thesis, is going to attempt to summarize this point, and in the process, he gives us a nice little reductio ad absurdum. Let's have a listen.
Thinking about it intuitively, you think of the two principles as being in somewhat of an opposition to each other, that entropy is just this progression towards disorder, like how are we evolving these complex structures of life. But it was really fascinating to think about it in terms of life is basically a side effect of the way that entropy unfolds with, being countered by gravitational forces, etc.
It's a side effect. So there you have it. Life is basically a side effect. Now, from a scientific perspective, of course, life is complex, and science has repeatedly failed to explain how life could have arisen in the first place. That's, again, a scientific fact. It's been trying for a century now, and we've had nothing but failures. There is no scientific evidence that life arose spontaneously. But now, in this scheme, life becomes a mere side effect. This is what happens when you ignore the science, and unfortunately, Greene does nothing to disabuse the poor fellow. Let's listen to Greene's response here.
So you're right, we're kind of a sideshow that the universe leverages to have matter reach its entropic potential.
So this is sounding a little bit like Spinoza and pantheism. The universe is alive. Well, sorry, the universe doesn't leverage anything for some ultimate purpose. This is teleology. Now you might say I'm being a little too critical here, a little too hard on Greene. Isn't he just using poetic language? No, not really. This is Greene's idea of entropy assisting evolution is not only unscientific, it is teleological. Okay, the next discussion shifts toward determinism. Let's have a listen.
Right? Just as a star is a collection of particles that is fully governed by the ironclad laws of physics, we each are collections of particles that are fully governed by the ironclad laws of physics too.
We each are collections of particles fully governed by the laws of physics, the ironclad laws of physics. Okay, where is this coming from? Why is this true? How does Greene know this? Okay, before we get into that, let's hear some more about this.
Bottom line message is we are all bags of particles governed by the laws of physics.
Okay, one more for good measure.
We are physics that is manifested in a highly coordinated manner. And that's really the only distinguishing characteristic of us compared to the inanimate objects in the world.
The only distinguishing characteristic. Conceptually, we are no different than rocks, just a little more coordinated. We are merely collections of particles controlled by the ironclad laws of physics. So where does Greene get this conviction? Because it is fraught with problems, scientific problems. One of them is our sensory perception and consciousness. So, you have electrical signals coming into your brain. Electrical signals from your 5 senses, your ears, nose, taste, sight. They're all sending electrical signals into your brain. Those electrical signals are being converted into your sensory perceptions. You're seeing this, you're hearing this. Somehow those electrical signals are getting converted into sensory perceptions. There is no scientific evidence, there's no scientific explanation for how that happens. Okay, that's just a scientific fact. I'm not making a claim here. That's just a scientific fact. Science fails to explain our experience of sensory perception and consciousness. That's a fact. Greene's solution is a promissory note. He's aware of this problem, and he's going to give you a promissory note. Let's have a listen.
Because as we've gotten better and better at understanding the structure of life, most people who think about it have come to the conclusion that it's just particles and the laws of physics and chemistry and biology, but that all reduces to physics, and that's all that you need. And I think that at some point in the future, 50, 100, 1,000 years, whatever, we will come to a similar realization about consciousness, and we'll kind of look back and smile at how in the 20th and 21st century we injected so much mystery into this quality of the world, when in reality it was nothing more than particles and laws.
Did you hear that? Some point in the future. We're going to look back and smile. 1,000 years from now, whatever. Some point in the future. So Greene's solution is that we'll figure it out sometime in the future. A promissory note. Well, sorry, but science does not work that way. You can't say evolution and determinism are true because someday we'll figure them out. Okay, next we come to free will. And of course, with determinism, there is no free will. Let's have a listen.
We have consciousness, but also, how do we have any sort of free will?
Well, we don't.
Right.
That's the end of that. I said that flippantly, but I really do believe that, as you see in the book. However, there are so many different definitions of what free will is that you have to take a statement like that, I would say, with a grain of salt, or you really have to plumb it very carefully to understand the kind of free will that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the freest kind of free will. I think that's what most of us intuitively imagine when we think that we have free will. We imagine that we are the ultimate autonomous authors of our actions, right? We can think about the world, we can be affected by the world, but ultimately when we act, that action is originating within us. We are not mathematical beings whose strings are pulled by physical law. And that just is incoherent.
Incoherent.
We are collections of particles fully governed by physical law, and every thought that we have, every action that we take is nothing but those particles playing out the dictates of the mathematical equations, the physical laws.
So, as if this interview wasn't strange enough already, now we learn that free will is incoherent. We are nothing more than collections of particles fully governed by physical law. Utterly amazing. How does Greene know these truths? Hint, he doesn't. None of this is from science. Let's see where this leads.
And right here, even sitting here right now, I just articulated a thought through a sentence. And I take a step back and I'm like, yeah, my particles just did a reasonably good job of saying what my other particles were trying to articulate. And I sit back and I'm like, thank you, particles, for doing that, or thank you, physical law, for allowing my particles to do that. And in that way, I actually feel a degree of gratification for the fact that my particles did something that I'm happy with. And when my particles do things that I'm not happy with, I similarly feel a degree of remorse. But that's what's going on. And all of it comes from physical law.
So this is where you end up, and Greene is oblivious to the absurdity. Now, we've already seen that despite Greene's bizarre truth claims, science, in fact, does not have explanations for any of this. This is what is so strange. One would think that given Greene's over-the-top confidence and certainty, that science would have a pretty good explanation. There would be a there. There isn't. But that's not the only problem. In fact, we have direct evidence against everything he has said. We experience free will. So how does Greene get around that? Let's have a listen.
It doesn't feel like I'm being ventriloquized to have this conversation. It feels like these are my actual thoughts.
Yeah, no doubt there is some evolutionary advantage to these collections of particles having the sensation that they are in control of their actions. Presumably, beings that have that sensation are maybe able to navigate the ancestral environment better than collections of particles that did not have that sensation. And so it's deeply ingrained in everything that we do and everything that we think.
So, evolution to the rescue. From where did we get all this free will evidence, our own personal experience? Where did that come from? Evolution created it. So not only did evolution create everything, including the millions of species, all the different designs, the incredible human brain, it also created our sensation of free will. Our sensation of free will somehow arose from random mutations, an extremely low probability event, and then was selected for because strangely it provided a fitness advantage. Somehow it led to a differential reproductive advantage. The result, our experience of free will, is an illusion, courtesy of the evolutionary process. And by the way, there is zero scientific evidence for this. Grant pounds home this point. Let's have a listen.
Evolution did not equip us to understand the true nature of the world.
So evolution did not equip us to understand the true nature of the world. Here we have the ultimate reductio ad absurdum. Greene has just undercut his own position. He knows evolution and determinism are true. He's utterly convinced these are true, and yet he cannot know these are true. He just said evolution did not equip us to understand the true nature of the world. How can he have these convictions? He has undercut himself. His system has a massive internal contradiction. It has demolished itself. In spite of his earlier protestations that free will is incoherent, in fact, he now proves for all to see that determinism and evolution are incoherent. They're also anti-empirical, as we'll see next.
And I think a similar thing applies to free will. You know, we think we have it, we have the sensation of having it, but that's all that it is, a sensation.
So the mountains of evidence that we do have must be discarded as an illusion. And how do we know they are an illusion? Because they must be, of course. When the evidence doesn't support your dogma, you get rid of it. Next, Greene attempts to explain why we would expend so much time and energy on mythologies and religion. Let's see what he has to say here.
And a whole lot of time, there's evidence going back thousands of years, of course, we spend a whole lot of time getting together and exchanging fictional accounts that both members of the conversation know have nothing to do with the external world, and yet we feel compelled to listen to these stories, to repeat these stories, to modify these stories, to pass these stories on. Why in the world do we do that? What a waste of time.
A whole lot of time exchanging fictional accounts. That's interesting. Fictional accounts. I think this is hitting closer to home than Greene realizes. Okay, well, we'll end up with the obligatory summary statement of Epicureanism. Let's hear it.
That there is no ultimate purpose, there is no ultimate meaning. We are the product of the purposeless, mindless laws of physics.
No purpose, no meaning. Okay, so to summarize, I have to say that I did thoroughly enjoy this interview because it is such a canonical example of man's hubris and hypocrisy. Its sheer absurdity, presented with such clarity and over-the-top, unfounded confidence, made me think of Paul's warning to Timothy that, quote, they will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. Religion drives science, and it matters.